Hello, this is our third installment in getting an Autotools setup up and running from scratch. In this one we're going to talk about how we can integrate the Qt Creator IDE with our Autotools project. Let's just take a quick look at our project again. As a quick review, we have a project called First GTK, and inside that we created a source file, main.c, which just creates a GTK window. We have our configure a C file, which was mostly generated for us. We added GTK3 here, and then our make file, our auto make file here, where we added the C flags and the libs. And so from that we're able to go into our build directory, which we're at right now, and we can type makes the project, run the project, and there we have our window. Very simple. But it's kind of nice to be able to use an integrated environment, given the option, something that that works for you. A lot of people do enjoy working in a console-based environment like VI or Vim. However, I do like using an IDE. I feel like it gives me a better overall view of what's going on at any given moment in time. Sadly, there aren't a lot of great IDEs for C programming. There's a new one from JetBrains called C-Line, which looks like it might be on that path, but it's basically targeting C++ right now, and they're still definitely a work in progress there. I did discover that Qt Creator ends up being a pretty good option, so let's take a look at that. This has largely been the interface for Qt Creator for a number of years. It's targeted to C++ development, specifically with the Qt Toolkit, which is a very nice C++ toolkit, and I highly recommend that if you're doing any cross-platform GUI programming, that it be on your short list of things to look at. That said, it doesn't natively support what we're going to try to do here. But there are some things that help out. First is, if you go into the plugins, about plugins, you'll see that there's this Autotools project manager. This is not from the Qt company, this is from a third-party developer, but it is bundled with Qt 3.6, which, as you can see, is what I have here. And it's not enabled by default, so you need to enable that and then restart Qt Creator. And that will give us some Autotools integration. Once you've done that, you need to import the project. To import a project, you click the new button and then you choose import here on the left. We're going to import an existing. As you see here, it can import a QMake, a CMake, or Autotools project. Hit choose, browse to our directory, which is here. You can give it a name, and this name is Qt Creator's kind of name for the project. And here, this is kind of important. We have a very simple project here, so there's not a lot going on. But if you're importing an existing Autotools project which has a lot more going on, this may become more important. Basically, this is to tell Qt Creator what files it needs to track in its project view. And it's very good here. It finds by default the ones that we care about. I haven't talked about config.h, but it's typically heavily included a file in your headers or in your C files in an Autotools project. But we got our main, found that, and I'm going to go ahead and click the test here because our test will be under there. But notice nothing else under build is tracked, which is correct, and we don't care about this directory here. I'm going to go ahead and add it to Mercurial, which is what I usually use. And there we go. So now we see we've got our main.c file, and we've got our config.h file. All is well. The config.h, just briefly to go over it, one of the things that when we run configure, it creates this file automatically for us, and all the little defines that are sometimes needed when you're programming in C in cross-platform environments can be handled here. For instance, I often run across the situation where I need to have GNU source defined for some of the additional C functions that I like to use, and Autotools will automatically have that here. And then what you do is you just go to your C files, and pretty much in every one of them you would just include config.h, like that. And that's how it's designed to be used. But everything looks good here, except that the first thing we notice is that this GTK, we're getting this underline here, that indicates there's a parsing error, or there's an error of some kind. And right there we're getting that familiar no such file directory. That's because Qt Creator doesn't read our Autotools config and then figure out what's going on. It approaches this from a little bit more of a dumb perspective, if you will. It's easy to fix though. This includes file is where we will put all the include directories that are required for the parsing. Keep in mind, this error has nothing to do with the build. This is purely just a Qt Creator IDE error message, and its parser doesn't know where that is and how to find it. Qt Creator uses its own parser. There is experimental support for using Clang as a parser, but by default it uses its own. So to fix that, we need to put some of the directories that we get from package config into here. I'm going to come over here and let's take a look again at package config, C flags, GTK plus -3.0. And this is what I'm talking about. This directory right here we need. And I know for a fact that when I'm doing this stuff, I always need these glib directories as well. Now, it's possible, depending on what parts of the GTK toolkit you might be interfacing with, you may need to add some of these other directories there to make Qt Creator happy. Keep in mind, though, that again, this has nothing to do with when you're actually building. This is purely for the IDE itself. So now you'll notice that that little error went away, and all my symbols are now highlighted that we would expect to be highlighted. Okay. If you're dealing with other parts of the GTK, for instance, let's say you're in the Cairo library here, you would need to add that to the includes file as well. The next thing that I like to do is in this files directory. This is the one when we were clicking those checkboxes in the beginning, picked which files show up here in this project view. I always like to add configure.ac and makefile.am because I like to be able to see them from this structure as well. And so here they are. Configure AC, we get some nice syntax highlighting here, and in our makefile. Now there's one caveat to modifying this makefile AM, and that is that makefiles are very sensitive to the use of tab characters, actual tab characters. And by default, Qt Creator, like many IDEs, translates tabs into spaces. Or when you hit the tab key is turned into, say, 4 or 8 spaces. That's kind of a problem for us. If we have in makefile format, let's say source main.c was dependent on I don't know, some other arbitrary file like a resources file, resources.xml, and in order to produce resources.xml I needed to run the glib compile resources command, and I'm not sure the syntax here, I always have to look it up, but you see that's just a shell command there to hopefully create this this file. Let's pretend that's how you would do it. The point, though, is that this space right here has to be a tab character. If it's spaces, then make will usually error out on it. This is just an artifact of the original design of makefiles. So how do we fix this? Well, if we click the projects button here on the left, and then the editor tab at the top, we can set some custom editor settings for our project. I'm going to change this to custom. And right here we have this thing called tab and indentation tab policy. Right now it's spaces only. I'm going to change that to mixed. I leave this at 8 and I leave this at 4. And this does something really cool to solve our problem. What happens now is if I hit a tab key, one tab key, I still have 4 spaces. But if I hit tab again, so I have 2 tabs in a row, that gets translated into a tab of size 8. And this will satisfy the requirements for a makefile. So normally you're just hitting a single tab, and then it's not a problem. It can become, if you're, when you're in your source C files, you might need to, instead of hit tab, use literal spaces if you're going to do multi-level indenting. But short of that, that seems to work okay, at least for me. Okay, that solves that little problem there. Now the build process itself, we kind of need to tell Qt about that. Like if I was to hit build here, I think we'll get an error. Yeah, so it doesn't know where the makefile is. It doesn't know what to do. So again, in this projects tab on the left, we'll click the build button. And then here we're going to tell it where the build directory is. And as I've discussed several times, I like to do it in a subdirectory called build. As a bonus, in the make all build step, I usually put the -J. And this is allows for parallel make. And typically people will give it the number of cores in your system. I have an 8-core system, so I'll go ahead and put 8. This can significantly speed up the time of compile if you have a large code base or even a medium-sized code base. It's especially important if you're doing C++, because as we all know, C++ is rather slow to compile. Okay, and that solves kind of this make problem, and now if I click this, should, in our compile output, I get the make output that we were seeing in our console over here. Remember, this is that benign warning that we're getting from Perl with the current version of Automake and the current version of Perl, at least that I have on the system. So that seemed to go okay. Now if I hit the run button, it says, well, I don't know what you want me to run. So how do we fix that? I think you can fix it here, but I usually go back into that project area, and now I hit run here on the top, and then the executable that we're creating is called first GTK. Now this needs to be the same as one of the programs, executable programs you're defining in your Automake file. It can be any one of them, but it has to be one of them. In this case, we just have the one. So it has to, this is case sensitive because it's running it from the console. So now if I hit run, there we go. We get our little window there. So we're all set. If I was to make a change in here, and let's just change this to say GTK3 app, and I go to run it again, this should do an automatic build and run for us. And there we go. It just automatically did it and ran it. This is the way most IDEs work, when you just hit run it. Auto saves, auto builds, auto does all that stuff. You might get a notification on yours where it says, do you wish to save the file before you build? And there's a little checkbox that says always save, and that's usually how I operate. Okay, now there's one fly in the ointment here, and that is, remember I said if you change your configure AC, you should rerun auto reconf. And if we look at our build process here, there's nothing about that in our build, and all we're running is make. So how do we handle that? Well, we can add a custom build step. Let's see, where is it? Right here. Add build step, custom process step, and we can call this. This is configure. // configure. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's auto reconf. And our arguments, the arguments have to be here. They can't be on that command line. For those of you who are used to passing commands using the Unix API, you'll be familiar with this issue. And so the command here is, or the arguments are VI. And then our working directory, autoreconf has to be run from the root of your project. So there's a kind of a way you can figure out what this little variable here that the IDE is using. If you click the Run tab, there's this button here, and this gives us the variables. There's obviously there's nothing wrong with your screen. There is a bug here of some kind in this version that's causing this to not render properly. But we see there is this thing called source_dir, and I don't know if you can see that properly, but it's the word source and then a capital D for dir in camel case. So if we go back and we change in our build, we change this here to source_dir. That's the root of our project. Okay. And now the thing is, we need this to run before the make, so we need to push that up. This little button here on that line will push that up. So now we have two build steps. We have running autoreconf and running make. Now if I hit build, we should get that, unless I've done something wrong here. It looks like it doesn't like something. Not sure what we're doing here. Let's look at that again. Oh, I spelled this wrong. Okay, so let's fix that. Auto reconf. Right? Okay. And it looks. Oh, no, it's, okay, so let's go back to our build here. And now, if we look at our compile, there we go. We see, so in red, this is rerunning autoreconf here. So now every time I build, it'll run that process. If I click again, you'll see there it is, running autoreconf. Well, we're still not there, because every time you run autoreconf, what that really means is it recreated configure, which means you should rerun configure. So we go back into the projects, and now we need to add another custom build step. This time, configure. And it's /configure because we're going to run, as always, from the build directory. And we don't have any arguments to that. Okay. So let's run it again. Oops. And look at our compile. And now I should see so here's the autoreconf. And then here is configure being run. And then after that, make is run, except that there's nothing to make. Everything's current. So we can go up here and we can do a rebuild all. And I believe it'll clean everything. And then I did a clean. I did that. And then am I missing something? I don't see the make step. Oh, I have these backwards. There we go. So autoreconf, then configure, and then make. There we go. So let's look at that again. There. And we'll just do a rebuild all so you can see. In fact, let's go ahead and make this big for this process. Build, rebuild all. So does a clean when you do a rebuild, followed by autoreconf, followed by configure, followed by make. Okay, that solves our problem, except that you really don't need to do all of that every time you need to run your application or build your application. Like if I hit the build button here, I'm not going to clean, but it's still running the autoconf followed by configured followed by make, and that adds a fair bit of time. So what you can do is you can come in here and you can hit this little disable button, and this disables those two steps. and you have to come back and re-enable them to do it. So now if I hit rebuild, now it'll just do a make clean and a make. See, I'm not doing that configure step because we don't need to do it. If I need to do it, I have to go back into the projects, re-enable that, and then click the buttons. Because of that, I typically will just use a command prompt for that particular issue. Now, the thing is that you don't, once your project is set up, there's usually not a lot, you're not coming into this configure.ac and changing it very often. So you don't need to keep running auto reconf. It's only if you do something like this where you're creating new, or checking for new libraries and new header files, that kind of thing. The make file, if you're just doing things simple like adding these flags or adding source files, here again, you don't, for most stuff you don't need to run auto reconf. You can just go ahead and do your regular old make, and when you run make, it'll know that it needs to regenerate a new make file if auto make, or if the make file AM had changed. So I hope that makes sense. So my typical workflow would be come in here to configure AC, and maybe we're going to add another library here, modules, and let's say I want to add glib, and that's glib-2.0, and I'm not going to do anything on failure there. Just going to get that through, save. So when I do that and save that, I actually will come here and I'll just manually run the auto reconf this way. That way I don't need to futz around with the turning these on and off. I'll usually have them here just in case I want to do that, but I don't typically do it that way. And remember, anytime you run auto reconf, you should rerun your configure. And oops, configure 2 dots. Okay. And I make. And nothing really changed because although I've added that checking for the glib libraries, it's not being used directly. And in fact, in this particular case, glib is brought in automatically if you get GTK. So I hope that makes sense and is useful to any of you who want to use Qt Creator. That gets you started. Remember that there's a couple things that you need to do. You want to put the include directories that you need for your project so you don't get warnings from the Qt IDE. This is not, I repeat, not have anything to do with actual compiling. I could have built successfully with our buttons here once they were set without this, but it's something you want to do so you don't get your squiggles. Then the files is where I add configure AC makefile am so that I can see them in my IDE. If you create a file externally, if I came in here and in my source directory I created another file, I don't know, main.h, it won't show up here because it was created externally. So the simple way to do that is just add it in this right there, save that file, and now we'll see it's there. You can create the file from within the IDE and then you don't have a problem. So here we could say general, I usually just do this empty file for C, and say other.c. And you'll see there, then it added it into that files for us. So only if it's external do you care about that. The config here is just, I've never really had to use this, but if you need to put defines in your project at a global space for Qt Creator to know what's going on, this is where you do it. And again, I don't believe this has anything to do with the compile or the build. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.